Big Brother, mainstream media, government cover-ups. You want answers? Well, so does he. Live from Austin, Texas, broadcasting worldwide, it's Alex Jones.
The former director of the Advanced Space Program Development for the U.S. Air Force in the Ford and Carter administrations when it was secret, and a former United States Air Force lieutenant colonel with 101 combat missions. He holds a Ph.D. in aeronautics and nuclear engineering from the California Institute of Technology. Despite his involvement with space programs and defense, he emerged as an early public critic of the Strategic Defense Initiative when they weaponized it. SDI, a.k.a. Star Wars, during the Ronald Reagan administration. In 2000, he campaigned nationwide for the nomination of Reform Party of the United States of America for President of the United States. ThePatriots.us is his excellent website, and I want to cover several issues with him. But first off, sir, when I saw this last week, Darpa loses contact with hypersonic aircraft. They claim they lost contact with the last one that goes 13,000 miles an hour, we're told, as if that's the real speed. Pentagon agency tests hypersonic craft. They call it the global strike. And from other folks I've talked to who've worked in the Air Force, one of them was then hired out of the Air Force to work on the front line of the Apollo program, Raymond Teague. He told me a lot of stuff privately and then wouldn't say it once he got on air, but he did say some of it. He thought he was having heart trouble and thought he was about to die. He's still alive, thank God, and told me a lot of stuff, but I'm not even going to get into that. The point is, he said, yes, most of the space program's secret. What you see is not all that's out there. You... actually kind of got a little annoyed when I kept asking you for hours, in the green room at the ballroom to tell me more. You said, okay, I'll tell you some stuff that's leaked out that they said that should be classified. But you talked about robotic drones, DU sabos, decapitation weapons for heads of state. And now I'm seeing more and more of this. So my question is, they're telling us this is the latest, but from my information, they're just showing us, older stuff, kind of like the B-2 bomber was around for 20 years before they rolled that out in the late 80s. And so what's your take on the, quote, end of the shuttle program that we know Wernher von Braun thought up in the 30s, and the fact that they admit that more than 80% of the space program is under DARPA and the Pentagon?
Well, sure. When I was on active duty, I was the executive agent for all of DARPA's activities in space, which means I made the final decisions on the contractors and the money and all that stuff, and approved the reports. And they were doing a lot of interesting things at that time, which of course were secret, like laser battle stations and whatnot. And we also developed components for other black programs, like those directly under the Assistant Secretary of the Air Force, spy satellites and all the rest of that. So, yeah, there was a lot of stuff going on. And I was deeply into hypersonic aerodynamics. My PhD thesis at Caltech was studying shock waves and boundary layers and interactions and whatnot at hypersonic speeds at extremely high altitudes. And so, I mean, this stuff has been under study for a long time. I did postdoctoral work at the von Karman Institute in Belgium in numerical methods for solving complex aerodynamic problems like hypersonic flight turbulence, which is even worse. But it's interesting to me that they still don't know enough about the aerodynamics to be able to control these things. They're able to launch it, and 9 seconds later it goes unstable and they lose it into the Pacific. And
if we're to believe them, these could have weapons platforms on them, and they're claiming they keep failing, and they're putting them into orbit. And that's some of the things that you talked about, that even by the late 70s, there were these unmanned craft up there with the sabos.
Well, I don't think they can hide something like that in orbit. And I got to say, it's much easier to put something like that into orbit than it is to fly it 13,000 miles an hour through the atmosphere and bring it down. Well,
then let me go back before we get into this. You talked about debating the new head of Star Wars and others, and that they would get mad and start blurting classified things out. And that's the only reason you can talk about it. But can you give us stuff that is supposed to be classified but is now public domain? Give us as best you can without violating your national security agreements of the type of stuff they've got.
Well, they can put a lot of stuff into orbit. The thing is, there's so much space capability around the world now that they can't hide it. We've got school teachers in England and whatnot that watch every launch of the United States. And
well, no, the Japanese have found big, what looks like platforms in space and things. I mean, there is a lot of unknown stuff up there.
Well, there's stuff up there that nobody knows exactly what it is. But they do know its orbit, its altitude, and where it is over the Earth at just about any time.
Well, just tell us about the DU weapons.
Well, that's something that was under development a long time ago, and when I was debating one of the colonels in the Star Wars program, I was talking about the fact that we had shown way back in the 70s that a few pounds of metal properly shaped fired at the Earth from space could impact like a meteorite, dig a crater, and at least in theory be capable of destroying hardened military targets like command bunkers and missile silos totally without warning. Now, this colonel, in his rebuttal to me, said, "Now, Bob, you know perfectly well that that program to make titanium and depleted uranium cones and guide them with GPS, that program doesn't exist." And so, anyway, he had revealed technical details, which I had never done. The fact of the matter is that it's possible to do a lot of this stuff. Whether it's practical is another thing. Whether we have any such things in space ready to deorbit against a pinpoint target somewhere on the Earth, I really can't say at this point. I rather doubt it, but that we could have, because the technical capability, at least, is there.
Well, don't you just put a satellite with propulsion into space, launch it in one of the secret shuttle launches or in one of the other rocket launches, and then it's got a weapons array of the DU weapons. And because I believe what you told me was you were saying it was being looked at in unmanned systems for head of state decapitation.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. But remember, once those things are in orbit, to get them down out of orbit, you have to have propulsion to deorbit them. So they have to have some kind of propulsion. It's not just a dumb piece of metal. And then you have your sensors, you have your GPS guidance, but you also need to have some kind of capability to steer it, either with little thrusters or with little aerodynamic devices at the tail end of the cone. And that's one of the things that's hard to do. And
oh, I see. They're always trying to get steering, like with this new little space plane, and that's why they're doing it in the atmosphere and not in orbit where it's easier, because once the weapon comes into the atmosphere, that's when it starts going crazy. They can get the speed, they just can't get the accuracy.
Right, right. Now, getting the accuracy is not impossible. Either we studied terminally guided ICBMs, and if you can do that, you can do it with these rods from God, or whatever they call them now. These kind of projects.
You're talking about controlling an ICBM throughout the entire process as it launches, goes into orbit, comes back down, and goes through the MERV sequence. Now, Doctor, expanding
about accurately pinpoint, guiding, and controlling the individual warheads.
Yes. Expanding on that, because we're about to go to break, and I want to come back and talk about Fukushima. Well, let's just get to Fukushima now. You were absolutely accurate in that, and now it turns out they knew there were all these meltdowns. They covered it up, and now the EPA has just raised the level of radiation of what they say is safe. That is not very reassuring for future disasters, that they just always cover this stuff up.
That's right, and still in this country, we're not talking about replacing the antiquated reactors that are similar to Fukushima, and which are on fault lines, like along the San Andreas Fault in California, and there are even fault lines through the Midwest, and also up near New York City with the Indian Point reactor. All these reactors are disasters waiting to happen, and if we can't get rid of them, we should replace them with a modern thorium reactor or a molten salt reactor. There are lots of new kinds of reactors that are far, far safer, orders of magnitude safer than the old kinds that we have deployed around the country.
All right, Dr. Bowman, I want to come back and get any other final comments on the secret space program from you, and then also your view on what's happening in the economy. Bob Bowman is our guest, and we'll give you his website as well when we come back. I'm Alex Jones with Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.tv. Ask yourselves, what are you doing in this time of great challenge? What are you doing to unlock minds?